Boy, the Wandering Dog by Marshall Saunders. Just here something extraordinary happened, and I must say in connection with it that I have marvelous luck in re-meeting persons and animals. My master suddenly exclaimed, "I am frightfully thirsty, Boy. Let us stop at this nice little cottage, and see if that old lady in the window will give me a drink." Master drew up the car by the side of the road, got out, and I jumped after him, and whom do you think I saw rolling on a bed of catnip under the kitchen window? My acquaintance of a night some time ago, the Lady Gay Cat. She knew me at once, and with a surprised purr sprang toward me. "How do you do, dog? I'm glad to see you. I believe you saved my life by getting me to stop stuffing myself. It was my only pleasure in that dreadful place, and it cost some effort to give it up." "Do tell about yourself," I begged her, "and hurry up. My master won't wait long, I'm sure." She smiled the smile of superior knowledge. "Yes, he will, when Granny gets talking to him. She's the most crackajack old woman you ever saw." "Her face looked fine," I said, "as I saw it through the window." "Ah, she's the woman for me," the cat said fervently. "But you want to know how I got back to her. Just after that evening I saw you, things began to go badly at the eating place. The help broke the dishes and got saucy, the people off the street didn't patronize us, the man broke his leg, and the woman got melancholy. One day, when she sat staring at the floor, I happened to pass in front of her. "'I believe it's that black cat,' she said, springing up and running to the room where her husband lay in bed. 'We've had bad luck ever since we picked her up.' "'Don't be a fool,' he said roughly. But he couldn't stop her. 'It's true,' she said. 'I've heard bad luck always follows stolen animals, and your luck don't change till you take 'em back.' The man was quite angry, but he couldn't change her. Didn't she, the next Sunday, in spite of their lack of money, take the train and bring me out here. She brought the basket in which she had confined me right in here to Granny. 'Look here,' she said, she is a great fat woman and very outspoken. 'I did an awful thing a few weeks ago. I stole the cat I saw sitting near this house. I don't know whether it's yours or not, but I want you to help me get it back to its rightful owner. I believe it brought a kind of spell on me.' Granny opened the basket, and oh, how gently she took me out and stroked my fur. 'It's my cat,' she said, 'and I thank you for bringing her back. Sit down, and I'll make you a cup of tea.' The woman was very glad to sit down and have some tea and talk, after her ride in the train, and while I licked my fur into shape, I listened to what my dear old Granny said to her. Now I want to tell you this, just to convince you what a good mistress I had, for you seem to think I was a little soft to mourn so much. Said Granny, 'Why did you steal my cat?' 'To hunt mice,' said the woman. 'An eating house always draws them.' 'But you could have got one in the city. Why take my little friend who loves the country?' 'City cats ain't no good,' said the woman. 'They're all sick except the rich cats that have a nice place to play.' 'Stealing is always wrong,' said Granny. 'You bet it is,' said the woman. 'I ain't going to steal nothing again. I was brought up right. I had a good mother.' 'How is your business getting on?' then asked Granny, for she likes to know all about anyone she sees. 'Rank,' said the woman. 'The place needs a new fit out, and the landlord won't do it.' 'By fit out, what do you mean?' asked Granny. 'I mean new paper, new linoleum, some mirrors folks love to stare at themselves and I want a little closet fitted up with a looking glass and a wash basin, so the shop girls can fix their hair and powder their faces when they comes in to eat.' 'How much would it cost?' asked Granny. $200 at the least,' said the woman in a dreary way. 'It's a big place.' Granny went to her grandmother's soup tureen in the closet, and took out her stocking. She has a stocking, you know, but you must not tell anyone. She doesn't believe much in banks." "She wasn't going to give the woman money, was she?" I inquired. "Wait and see," said the cat, who spoke quite slowly and mouthed her words, as if she did not often have a listener. I find that longing to talk with cats and dogs and human beings too. So many are ready to talk, so few want to listen. Well, the black cat went on to tell me that the woman looked as amazed as if she had seen a ghost, when good old Granny began counting out the $5 bills. "You don't mean to say you're going to lend me the money?" she exclaimed. "Just what I'm going to do," said Granny. "I've got two good sons. I brought 'em up right, and they slip me in a $5 bill every time they write. I'm going to lend you what I've got." "You're going to lend me money," cried the woman, "when I stole your cat." "You're going to be a better woman in the future than you've been in the past," said Granny. "I can see it in your eye." Then the woman broke down and cried, but recovered herself when Granny began to count the money. They went over it together and made out $195. "Take it," said Granny, holding out the stocking, "and bring it back when you get good and ready. There's no hurry." The woman held tight on the stocking, but she said quite anxiously, "How much interest will you charge?" "No interest," said Granny. This broke the fat woman all up. She cried and sobbed, and when she found in addition that Granny didn't want even an IOU, she hugged and kissed her as if she had been her daughter. She told Granny all that had ever happened to her, and they became great friends on the spot. "Hurry up," I said to the cat. "I see Master drawing on his gloves." We had moved into the cute little hallway of the cottage, and I could look in through the kitchen door and see Master talking to the old lady who had made him a cup of tea just as she had done for the fat woman. I think he was telling her about the baby, for she had a photograph album on the table between them, and had been pointing out pictures of little children to him. "That's a fine story," I said. "What's the end?" "There isn't any end," said the cat triumphantly. "It's still going on. The woman comes out here every Sunday evening when trade is low, and she brings goodies to Granny, and Granny goes in to see her once a week, and goes to a show with her, and tells me all about it when she comes home." "And the restaurant, did they make it over?" "Granny says it's a dream now, with bright yellow and red and purple flowers on the wall, and a fine mirror, and lots of water and towels, and there's a big crowd all the time." "And the money?" I went on. "Granny's getting it all back, $10 a week, and the woman loves her like a daughter. Granny never had a girl, just boys." I pushed my inquiries a little further. "And how does the woman treat you?" "Like a Christian. She says no one need ever say nothing agin black cats to me. There's more in animals than most folks reckon." "Good bye," I said, running after my master, who had shaken hands with the old woman, and was jumping into the machine. "That's a fine story. I'm mighty glad you had a safe exit from your troubles." "Call again," said the cat to me. "And call again," called Granny to master as we sped away. The next interesting thing that happened to me was the homecoming of the baby. My, what a fuss! The apartment refurnished, renovated, fumigated, aired and re-aired. Master, whistling as cheerfully as a schoolboy, gave up his lovely front room and bath to his little pickaninny. "You and I won't mind the view of the backs of apartment houses, will we, boy?" he said to me. Of course I didn't mind. Anything to make him happy and to keep with him. I was mortally afraid he would get like those silly nurses and send me out of the house. At last the great day came, and master and I took the car out to the hospital. Mistress all wrapped up and veiled, and baby and nurse got into it, and we tooted back to the city. Master had warned the maids that mistress had got very thin and nervous, and they must be extra gentle and quiet in their manner with her. They were lovely to her face, but they almost cried in the kitchen over her changed looks. "Oh dear," whimpered the cook, "ain't she the holy fright, the darlin' thing?" And Annie said something even worse. However, from that day on, they never criticized her as sharply as they had before. The baby had brought a new spirit into the house. My dear master still thought his wife was beautiful, and I could see that he was perfectly terrified lest she should eat too many sweets and get fat again. He offered her a diamond necklace if she would stop eating chocolates, and he watched her at the table and coaxed her not to touch any puddings that had a rich sauce. One day he found a little bit of brown paste on her upper lip. "Dearest," he said anxiously, "have you been eating chocolates?" She blushed like a naughty child. "Just once," she said. "Nurse had some. But I won't do it again," she went on, shaking her head. "I'm really anxious to please you, Rudolph." He kissed her quite warmly for him, and pushing the table away, sat down quite close beside her, and began to read. I was delighted that she liked to have him read to her now, but it made a great difference to me. She used to watch the clock with cunning eyes, and get more and more interested in what he was reading the later the evening grew. Sometimes she asked a question which did not exactly fit in. For example, when he was declaiming about the war in Poland, and she said, "I always did dislike Spaniards." He laid down his book. "I said nothing about Spaniards, my dear." Her thoughts had been wandering, and she couldn't speak till he gave her a clue. "I was reading of the woes of the Poles." "That is what I meant," she said. "Poles, of course. I never did care for them." I didn't know you had ever met any, he said dreamily, and then he plunged back into his book. She was nearly dead with sleep that night, and soon she said, Rudolph, would you just read me something about children before I go to bed? He put down the war book and took up one of poetry. I was sleepy too, but I caught a phrase, the cry of the children, and later in the night this phrase came back to me. We had no walk. It was too late to go when mistress went to the baby, and master said to me, let us turn in too, boy dog. It was good we got a little sleep early in the night, for we had rather a disturbed time later. While master was undressing, he talked to me about children. Poor little wretches, he said, how much they have to cry about. So many troubles that they outgrow with age. I listened to him with interest. I used not to know much about children, for I had never been thrown much with them, my owners being mostly childless or unmarried persons. However, as I told Gringo when I first met him, I had a great respect for the very young of the humankind, and I thought them remarkably clever. Since the baby came, I had been observing him closely. His little face looked to me very wise, and sometimes his expression was almost painful, as if he were trying to tell us something of a wonderful place he had come from. But the poor little soul had no words to express his thoughts. He just waved his little fists and rolled his head in despair. Master had gone quite daffy on the subject of babies. Dating from the day that he had heard of the arrival of the baby, he stared at every child he met in the street. He gave pennies to poor children, and watched them with delight when they ran to a candy shop. He stopped the perambulators of rich babies, and begged permission of the nurses to look at them. All babies were dear to him, because he had one of his own. To come back to this night, I slept for a while. Then I woke up with a feeling of great distress. Someone was in trouble near me. I could hear nothing, smell nothing, but I knew it was so, and I sprang uneasily from the big chair where I slept, and went to my master's bed. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. He was sleeping like a boy. I hated to disturb him, and I ran to the door leading to the hall and smelt hard under it. Nothing there. I went back to bed, but my uneasiness increased so terribly that, at last, if I had not aroused my master, I should have burst into terrible howling which would have disturbed the household and waked the baby. I pulled hard at the sleeve of his pajamas. Master, master, wake up. He turned on me eyes unseeing at first, then intelligent. What's the matter, boy dog? Burglars? I didn't know what was the matter, so I pulled hard to show he was to come and investigate. He rolled quickly out of bed, snatched his bathrobe, and followed me. He knew that I would not rouse him for a trifle. We stole out into the hall like two cats. There I was, puzzled. Which way did the uneasiness lead me? Master, of course, went right toward the door of the precious baby's room, but I turned my back on it and led him to the door leading out of the apartment into the general hall. Master, with a greatly relieved face, softly unlocked it, and we stood together outside. There were several other apartments on this floor. The trouble was in one of them. Ah! At last I caught it, the faint sound of sobbing. I rushed to the door of a pretty delicate little Englishwoman, whose husband had gone to the war. I laid my ear to the crack underneath. Yes, it was there, the sound of a child crying in the night. I scratched and whined and looked up at master. He listened and heard nothing, but he had such confidence in my judgment that he pressed the electric button. No reply, and the sobbing stopped suddenly. The trouble was there, however, and I redoubled my scratching at the door. Master rang again, then tried the door softly. Finally he called in a low voice, "Mrs. Waverlee." She did not reply. Then he said, "Egbert, Egbert, are you awake? It is Mr. Granton." There was a dead silence. I thought it was pretty good in master to stand there so patiently. He could hear nothing, see nothing, but he relied on me. Suddenly there was a noise inside, like a chair falling over. A little voice cried, "Oh!" Then a trembling hand began to fuss with the lock of the door, and at last it was thrown silently open. We stepped inside. Confronting us was a young Egbert Waverlee in his little nightie, his face swollen and disfigured from much weeping. He was trembling with the cold, for all the windows were open. He held out his little hand. "Mr. Granton, I can't wake muvver," he said with a quivering lip, "and she's getting cold." He was a dear little lad, and often came to call with his mother on my mistress, but lately we'd not seen much of them. I knew that her husband had gone to England, and she was feeling very sad about it. My master strode quickly past the child to his mother's room. She was not in bed, she lay all in a heap on the floor, beneath a large picture of her husband. As my master lifted her in his strong arms and laid her on her bed, a pencil fell from her cold fingers to the floor. He saw it, also a piece of notepaper with a crest on it, and presently he picked them both up and put them in his pocket. Then he ran his hand rapidly over Mrs. Waverlee's face, put it on her heart, and turned gravely to small Egbert. "How long has your mother been asleep, my boy?" The little fellow ran to a table and picked up a telegram. I think this made mother sleepy. She read it, and then she walked about and acted like a naughty boy, for she scribbled on the walls with a pencil, then she kissed me, and lay down there and went to sleep. Please wake her up, Mr. Granton. Master read the telegram, put it in his pocket, then he said, "Come, boy, let us telephone for the doctor." "And leave mother all alone?" said the child. "She won't wake, my boy," said master hoarsely. "She is sleeping a sound sleep." "Come, then, let us telephone quick," said the child. He seized master's hand, pulled him from the room, and stood trembling with excitement while master called up his family physician. "Will you come in my bed and get warm till he comes?" asked master of the child. "Oh, no, no," said the little boy in an agony, "not while mother is so cold. Come now, let us do something to make her warm." Master didn't know what to do. He cast an appealing look at his wife's door. Oh, if he could only ask her to help him. He didn't quite like to disturb her. Finally he sighed and allowed the boy to drag him to the bedroom. The little fellow ran to the bathroom. His face was more cheerful now that he was doing something. He let the hot water run, and to my master's astonishment, seized a rubber bag and filled it. "Often and often I've done this for mother after Sarah went away," he said with a pitiful smile. While staring at him, it came to my mind that I had heard some servants' gossip about Mrs. Waverlee turning economical, so she could send money home for the war. Instead of keeping 2 maids, she had one only, who came in the morning and went away at night. The child was wagging his dark head at my master in a confidential fashion. "Mother is not very strong, you know. Father said when he went away, 'Take good care of her, Boysie, till I come back.'" Master groaned so pitifully that I knew the telegram had said that the child's father had been killed in a battle. "Now, Mr. Granton," said the little boy, "please heap your hannies with Boysie's bedclothes, while I slip this in by mother's poor cold feet." The unhappy man did as he was told, and together they covered the poor lady warmly, and then Mr. Granton said gravely, "Your mother would not like it if she saw you standing here shivering with the cold." "No, she wouldn't," said the boy, smiling bravely. "She'd say, 'Boysie, you're going to have another sore throat. Mr. Granton, Boysie will get in beside mother. She always puts her arm round me and makes me so comfy.'" I am only a dog, but my heart ached for that child. His little manner was sweet and coaxing. His cunning eyes were fixed on his grown-up friend. He knew what had happened, but he wouldn't let his little self believe it. He was putting up the bravest fight I ever saw anyone put up, and the man didn't know what to do with him. Finally, master got desperate. He had closed the windows and turned on the heat, but the child was shivering horribly, and his face was swollen and disfigured with much weeping, and every little while he gave a great gasping sob. Seizing the boy in his arms, master carried him to his own room, put him in bed, and ordered me to jump in and lie close beside him. Egbert did not dare disobey him. He cast one frightened look after him, then threw his little arms so tight round my neck that he almost strangled me. "Muvver, muvver," he muttered over and over, "oh, muvver, muvver." He was a nervous, high-strung child, and I knew my master was terrified lest he should go the way of his parents. I heard him telephone to Mrs. Bonstone to come quickly. He knew the child ought to have a woman to take care of him. It was the middle of the night, but Mrs. Stanna got there almost as quickly as the doctor did. From the time she entered the apartment till 5 hours later, I knew only the boy's side of the story. Master disappeared, for he had many things to do. Stanna was lovely with the little orphan. She put her arms round him, hugged and kissed him, and told him a beautiful story about Walter Scott. Just as she got to the most thrilling part of her tale, Egbert said gravely, "What was on that piece of paper that upsetted muvver?" Mrs. Bonstone grew pale. The child was not blinded by her attentions. "Egbert," she said, trying to smile, and not succeeding very well, "you know your dear father went to the war." "Yes," he said shortly, "to fight the Germans, the devils." "Egbert," she said sharply. "That's what Louis calls them," he said in a matter-of-fact voice. "Of course, Louis is half French," said Mrs. Bonstone in a slow voice, and trying to gain time. "Louis said he'd like to unjoint the Kaiser," pursued Egbert, and he cracked his little finger joints as though he would separate them. "All over," he went on, "limb by limb. Louis would enjoy doing it." Mrs. Bonstone gave a nervous laugh, then tears came in her eyes. "Darling," she said coaxingly, "your father was a splendid man. He would never hate any one. All nations have good and bad people in them." "Did the Germans kill him?" asked Egbert quietly. "Well, suppose they had?" asked Mrs. Bonstone. "Wouldn't he be in that lovely place called heaven, with the angels and the beautiful meadows and water courses, and all the happy people who are through with this wicked world?" "And happy birds that fly above the altar," added Egbert, his little face lighting up. "Father would love that, but he'd rather be with me and mother." This was a poser for Mrs. Bonstone. However, she caught her breath, and was launching forth on a brave description of the glories of heaven, when the door opened softly, and Mrs. Granton came in. Naturally, she didn't like to see another woman in her house in the middle of the night, but the terrible circumstances blotted that occurrence almost out of her mind. She narrowed her eyelids and visualized her boy in the place of Egbert. She was a real mother now. Of course Mrs. Bonstone was on the whole a much better woman, and she had been perfectly lovely to her little brown baby. I don't suppose, indeed, that one could find a better counterfeit mother than she was, but mistress was the real thing. Something told her what the child was going through. Something told her what to do. She didn't try to tell him stories. She didn't try to appeal to his intelligence. She just smiled a triumphant mother smile, held out her arms to the stricken child, and he went into them. She sat down on the bed, rocking herself to and fro, and saying, "There, there," and patting him gently on the back, while listening to his wild weeping. His mother and father were dead, and his heart was broken. That was the whole thing. All the clever men and women in the world could not blind his eyes to his own intuition. He didn't reason, he knew. Presently she turned to Mrs. Bonstone. The child had whispered something in her ear. "Stanna," she said gently, "he wants to know if you will please go to his play corner and bring all his toys here." With a somewhat mystified face, Mrs. Bonstone hurried away, and presently returned with the skirt of her dress held up. As she unloaded animals, toy guns, whistles, Noah's arks, and every sort of game on the floor, I caught a glimpse of her face. Of course, at mistress's advent I had jumped off the bed. Mrs. Bonstone now looked strangely, almost frightened, as if she had seen something that startled her. With all my intuition I was far from guessing the truth, but I ran to the door and heard footsteps in the hall, and smelt mystery. Well, it would wait. I was more interested in the child than anything else. Has she got them all?" he gulped in mistress's ear. "Yes, yes, my boy." "Then let me go," and he clambered off the bed, and dashing away the tears from his poor red eyes, he went over all his heap of toys, selecting about 2/3 of them, and putting them in a heap, while he threw the others under the bed. The two women sat looking at each other, and at him, with mystified glances. Finally, the child had the toys all assorted, and his little face disturbed with rage, he jumped up and down on the heap, smashing and demolishing animals, birds, and games, and toy carts and engines. When they were all in a disfigured, ugly mass, he sprang back into the bed and nestled against mistress's breast. Mrs. Bonstone wonderingly picked up a section of a box. Something was stamped on it, and she read it aloud, "Made in Germany." Her face grew scarlet. "The whole war isn't worth the flame of rage in this one childish breast," she said furiously. Then almost in the same breath she calmed down. "But oh, my child, forgive, forgive. They are your enemies, but only more war can come from vengeful feelings. Don't let us have the hate song in this country." I don't know whether the child was listening. His head was buried in mistress's shoulder. Mrs. Bonstone went on, "Your darling mother forgave, for the words she wrote in her anguish all about the room, and on that piece of paper, were, I do not want my boy to be a soldier." Egbert still made no reply, and Mrs. Bonstone, getting up, went to the hearth rug, rolled it back, and busied herself in making a fire. When it was blazing nicely, she spread an eiderdown puff over a big chair, and said to mistress, "Your back must be aching, Clossie. You had better sit here." Mistress smiled in a grateful way, and sitting down in the big chair, took Egbert on her lap. Presently the door opened, and in came master. He looked tremendously excited in a quiet way, but still he took time to flash a glance of appreciation at his wife. Behind him stood a nurse, a strange nurse, not the baby's. "Will you let me have the boy, please?" she said to mistress, "and quickly. The doctor is waiting." Mistress let him go, and she turned inquiringly to her husband. He dropped down beside her and laid his hand on her lap. "A miracle, Claudia. The child's mother has come back to him. It was a case of suspended animation. He probably saved her life by the application of heat. I never heard of a similar occurrence. I shall question the doctor later." "Oh, thank God, thank God!" cried Mrs. Bonstone, and she sank on her knees at the other side of the fireplace. Mistress didn't say anything, but she stared at me, at her husband, and at Mrs. Bonstone. Finally she murmured, "'Twas the dog that did it." Then she got up and went quickly to her baby's room. Taking his little soft hand between her own, and very gently lest she should wake him, she dropped loving mother kisses on it. I had followed her, and stood touching her gown softly with my muzzle. She stooped down and patted me, and from that day to this mistress and I have been good friends. When I told Walter Scott about this the next day, he said, "It isn't safe to judge any human being, or any animal, till they have lived their lives out. You used to be too hard on your mistress." End of chapter 14.
Chapter 15. Mrs. Waverlee had no relapse, and she went to recuperate in the lovely hospital where my mistress had been. Master was questioned very much about her case by his men friends, who said it was one of the most extraordinary they had ever heard of. Oh, the petting I got! I had really done nothing but follow out my dog instinct, but these human beings seemed to think that there never had been, and never would be, such another dog. Mrs. Waverlee was a rich woman, and many persons said, "She will be sure to give the dog a jewelled collar when she gets well." Master and I were very uneasy about this, and he said one day, "If she does, I shall not allow Boy to wear it. Sometimes jewelled collars have cost dogs their lives." Fortunately, Mrs. Waverlee was something beyond the ordinary run of women. When she came back from the hospital, pale but strong and beautiful, she took my head between her two hands. I never saw such a look in the eyes of a mortal person before. You know we dogs sometimes see ghosts. She was like a woman that had died, and come to life again. If there had been any nonsense about her, it was all purged away. "Boy," she said in her lovely English voice, "to commemorate your sagacity, I am going to give a year's income to aid the various societies in New York that exist for the purpose of helping lost and starving animals." Oh, how this pleased me! The sufferings of animals affect me so strongly that merely to think of them makes me miserable. I try in vain sometimes to forget the horrible sights I have seen, the dreadful sounds I have heard. I wagged my tail, I licked her hands, I prostrated myself before this beautiful Englishwoman with the other world look in her eyes. She could do nothing for me, but make other dogs happy, whose sufferings made me so unhappy. I adored her, I worshipped her. There was something in her spirit that understood my dog spirit better, far better, than any other person in the world could comprehend me. What was it? I do not know. I merely understood that I reverenced her more than I reverenced my dear master, though of course I loved him more. The Bonstones and my master and mistress were intensely interested in this lovely woman, for she affected them somewhat as she affected me. For a long time after she came from the hospital, she and Egbert visited the Bonstones, and Gringo told me that every one in the household looked upon her with a kind of awe. "She don't care for things other women do," said old Gringo with a mystified air, "and I hear her whispering to herself, 'What shall I do with my life?'" "Then she isn't going back to England?" I said. "No," replied Gringo. "She grows quite cold and white when anyone asks her that. I think it's because they're still fighting over there, and she hates war." One day he came over to our house on his most excited double shuffle. "My boss has fixed the English lily," he said. "Out near his farm in the country is a village where the brown baby will have to go to school by and by. He's offered to build a schoolhouse if Mrs. Waverlee will teach in it." "And will she?" I asked eagerly. "She's tickled to death. Says to train children will be just the ticket for her." Soon after this Mrs. Waverlee came back to her apartment in our house. I heard a very indiscreet lady one day ask her if she didn't dread going back to the rooms where she had heard the news of her husband's death. Mrs. Waverlee gave the lady a strange smile and said, "He isn't dead to me. I feel him near me all the time." Both Egbert and his mother visited us quite frequently. They both loved the baby, and sometimes the Bonstones came over with little Cyria, and we had quite a party. Little Cyria was a darling, and she was not at all afraid of dogs. Every fine day her nurse took her out on the drive, and she stretched out her little hand to every dog she met. On windy days and rainy days the nurses all took their perambulators up to Broadway, where it was more sheltered. If you notice the New York babies in the vicinity of the drive, you will find that they all look very prosperous, for they are kept out of doors so much. Mrs. Bonstone fussed over Cyria, and Mistress fussed over George Washington, and the baby interest drawing the two ladies together so much, threw the two men together. Both Mr. Bonstone and my dear master were quiet men, disliking society, loving business, and enjoying nothing as much as a long walk together after their day's work was over. Mrs. Granton was not strong enough now to go into society, but Mrs. Bonstone was, and one day I heard her husband talking to her very seriously, and telling her that as long as she lived in the city she ought to keep up a certain amount of social life. She adored him still, and never hesitated to tell him so, and in the long run she usually did as he requested. "But I won't go out in the evening," she said, wagging her saucy head at him. "All right," he replied, "but mind you've promised not to drop all the women you know. You'll get warped and selfish if you do." "What a wise man you are," she said teasingly. "Do hurry and get your old farm ready, so I can be a farmer's wife." I was in the Bonstone house nearly every day, and if I was not, Gringo told me all that went on. He never ran out on the drive without his master. He was afraid of the policeman. On the Bowery, where everybody knew him, he had often gone out alone. I was anxious to know what he thought of the baby Cyria and the farm, and one day I asked him to tell me his real feelings. "Cross your heart feelings," I said. "I know you don't wear your heart on your sleeve." "Both things I hate," he said grumpily, "but I'm going to make myself like 'em." "Oh, Gringo," I said, "how can you hate Cyria?" "She sticks her fingers in my eyes when no one's looking," he said. "Doesn't that prove what I say, that children are enormously clever?" I exclaimed. "But why don't you get up and move away?" "She's master's baby. She's got to be amused." "But your master wouldn't like her to do that." "She'll get over it when she's older," he said patiently. "A dog has got to have some worries, or life would be too sweet." "And you don't like the idea of the farm?" "A Bowery dog on a farm?" said Gringo. "Me for the pavements." "Were you ever on a farm?" I asked. "No, and never want to be. I've heard tell what they're like. Nothing doing from morning till night." "Well, I don't like the country half as well as the city," I said, but I don't believe I've ever been in a really interesting country place. I'll tell you a great bit of news." "You don't mean to say you're going too?" interrupted Gringo. "Yes, I do," I said. "Master is going to move to the country." "Well, I vow," said the old dog. Then he added, "I thought I smelt that rat one day when your boss was talking to mine." "Yes," I went on, "your master is looking for a place for mine." "I'm mighty glad about having you near by," said Gringo. But he added shrewdly, "What does your missus say?" "She started it," I exclaimed. "It began this way. The other night she and master were talking before they went to bed. Said she, 'Rudolph, there is much sickness in New York among children.' 'Yes,' said he anxiously. 'Yes, I notice in the papers.' 'I'm worried about baby,' said she. 'So am I,' said he. 'Country life is better for babies,' said she, 'but I suppose you wouldn't like to go so far from your business.' Said he quietly, 'I've always loved the country better than the city, but I thought you couldn't abide it.' 'I used to dislike it,' she said, hanging her head, 'but we had no baby then, Rudolph.'" "And what did he say to that?" asked Gringo. "He didn't say anything. He got up and kissed her. They understand each other pretty well, now, and the next day, which was yesterday, he spoke to your master, and asked him to look for a place near yours. So you'll probably have us for neighbors, old boy. Isn't that great?" And I gave him a playful nip in his big shoulder. Gringo was deeply pleased, but he's like his master, he doesn't say much. "We're both no longer quite young," I went on, "and we've just got to make up our minds to like what our owners do. I prophesy that two clever men like your master and mine can make even country life interesting." "Wait till they deliver the goods," said the old dog. Then he added, "They'll be missed in this little old city." "But they won't leave it finally," I said. "They're planning to come in and out." I knew what he referred to. Mr. Bonstone and my master had been placing more and more of their business in the hands of their employees, and together they went about the city doing good. They had found out that a lot of harm results in many cases from rich people putting all of their charitable work in the care of hirelings. "Man to man," master used to say, "I want to know those I'm privileged to help." So often he left his office early, and he visited such poor places, that usually I was not allowed to go with him. I heard him telling his wife about the terrible suffering he found. "We'll have a war," he used to say often, "unless there's more contact between class and class." "Don't despoil yourself of all you have, Rudolph," mistress would say anxiously. "There's baby to be provided for." "I don't want to leave him a fortune, Clossie," he said one day. "A good education is all I wish to do for him." "Just a little something to start on," she said, with mother anxiety. Then she went on, "I wish you wouldn't call me Clossie any more. Say Claudia." Master was so pleased that he went out and bought her a beautiful ring to commemorate the occasion of dropping her doll name. While master was doing a little missionary work among human beings, I did a little among dogs, and had an adventure in the bargain. Of all the animals in the world, I pity most the performing animals. It is unspeakably pathetic to me to see those poor four-legged creatures on a stage, trying to do things they were never meant to do. Why should a monkey ride a bicycle, or pretend he's a fireman, when he just hates it? I've seen human beings in a theater shrieking with laughter at the antics of poor animals on the stage, whose eyes were eloquent with fright. Once I had as owner a lady who used to take me to the theater. She always had a box, and concealed by the flowing laces of her gown, I would watch everything that took place on the stage. Some things I liked. I think men and women enjoy strutting around, pretending they're someone else. But the dogs who appear in vaudeville, it nearly used to break my heart to see them. Once I saw roosters, poor, thin, half-starved looking creatures, who flapped their wings, and crowed, and stretched themselves when they came on the stage. showing that they had been confined in little cages instead of leading a free, open-air life as roosters should. Well, on the day, or rather the evening, when I played missionary, I had tried in vain to get Gringo to take a stroll with me. No, he would not, and lay down on a seat arranged for him in a window, so he could watch the passers-by in the drive. Summer was coming, and it was too late for fires, so he could not lie on the hearthrug. Master had gone off with Mr. Bonstone somewhere on the east side. By the way, I must not forget to say that Mr. Bonstone had given up his last naughty saloon. They were all good ones now. He had a great scene with his wife one evening when I was present. He still clung to the Bowery drinking place, and she had found out about it. She drew the most dreadful picture of Cyria growing up and becoming a drunkard. Mr. Bonstone didn't know whether to laugh or get cross with her, for as Gringo says, my boss's heart isn't on the water wagon. He believes in drink in moderation. Well, Mrs. Bonstone cried, and at last her husband comforted her, and said he would never sell another drop of liquor as long as he lived. "Nor drink it," she sobbed. "Well," he said, "I never have touched it. Don't think it wrong, but hated the taste." He had to promise, of course. A nice woman can do anything with a man, so now the Bonstones' house, like ours, was strictly teetotal, and if any persons fainted, they were revived pretty quick with some hot stuff that I think was mostly cayenne pepper, by the way it made persons jump. To come back to the evening of my adventure. I slipped down Broadway, running close to the stores and keeping the people between me and the gutter. One seldom meets a policeman near shop windows. It was a lovely evening, with a warm, spring-like feeling in the air, and this nice, wide, clean Broadway fascinated me more than ever, and everybody looked so happy and pleasant and well-dressed that I concluded all the people with troubles had stayed at home. Nearly every person had on new spring shoes. I really think that nowhere in the world, except in Paris, does one see such pretty, well-shod feet as in New York. I danced along, meeting quite a number of dogs, some of whom I spoke to, some of whom I did not notice. The most of them were led, and of course all had muzzles on. I had passed several moving picture places and a few vaudeville houses when it suddenly dawned on me that I was getting too far down Broadway and had better return home. I cut down a side street, but did not get far, for just as I had gone a few steps, I smelt a smell that took me back to Boston and several years ago. I was living then on Beacon Hill, and in the house next to me was a fine little toy spaniel called Amarilla. She was a little darling, and had a way of tossing her long ears as if they were curls. One day she disappeared most mysteriously. No one could find out what had become of the lost Amarilla, though it was suspected she had been stolen. Amarilla had a very gentle, clinging sort of an odor. She was an exquisitely clean little dog, but no matter how clean dogs or human beings may be, they cannot get rid of what Gringo calls their odoriferosity. He vows he can track his master if he touches a thing. Well, I was very much excited when I scented Amarilla. The poor old lady who owned her was quite childish, and she actually died of grief over the disappearance of her dog. It would be a great feather in my cap to track her. Yes, and get caught myself, my native caution whispered to me. I surveyed the scene. A vaudeville house on a quiet, narrow street, enormously high buildings each side. A fine place for a getaway, as Gringo calls a scamper from danger. Well, I would risk something for Amarilla. The show had been going on for a little time, for it was quite a bit after 8, and very often the door opened and persons came out, presumably those who had played their part for the last time and were going home. So if I ran in the door and was cautious, I would stand a good chance of getting out again. I seized my opportunity and bolted in when an enormously fat lady in a light evening cloak came out and entered a taxicab that had been standing by the curbstone. Now I was inside the door, and what did I see? A bare, narrow hallway and some steps. I crept cautiously up the steps, nosing and smelling various odors, animals, sawdust, straw, stale food, and waves of heat from some badly ventilated hall. Ah! Here my suggestion of Amarilla stopped. It was a medium-sized, untidy kind of basement room, with boxes littered about, travelling boxes of animals. All were empty. The animals must be on the stage with their trainer. But if Amarilla was on the stage, why was the room so strongly reminiscent of her? Amarilla was not on the stage. I followed my nose to a corner, and there was the dear little thing, crouching low, her pretty open face, like a child's, all distorted by fear. "Amarilla," I said softly. Oh, what a jump she gave. "Beauty," she said. "Why, Beauty, is that you?" Beauty had been my name in Boston, given me by a too fond mistress, who really thought me beautiful. "Tell me quick," I said. "What's the matter with you?" "I didn't do my tricks right," she said, "and the trainer beat me, and I was too frightened to go on the stage." "Then you're not happy with him." "Happy, Beauty? If you knew!" And she began to moan and cry softly. There was blood on her pretty coat, and I said sharply, "Brace up now, and get out of this. Follow me. I'll lead you to a good home." "I'm afraid," she said, shrinking back. "I never had much spirit, and all I had has been whipped out of me. I don't believe I could run a block." "Oh, Amarilla," I said earnestly, "do come with me. If you don't, I shall go home and dream of your misery, and cry in my sleep." That touched her a little, for she always was an unselfish little doggie. "Do come," I begged. For a few minutes she held out, and I was in an agony. Any minute her master might come and find me there, and I should be trapped too. "Oh, Beauty," she said despairingly, "I'd love to go, but he would run after me, and then he would nearly kill me." "Well, I'll lie down and let him catch me too." "No, no," she said wildly, "you wouldn't last any time, a dog of your spirit." My threat decided her, and she consented to follow me to the door. Waiting there in wild anxiety, I thought it would never open. We had to hide in a corner, and the trainer was actually marshalling the other dogs down from the stage to their travelling boxes before a stagehand came along and, opening the door, stepped out in the street to get a breath of air. I thought he would never move away from the open door. Finally a German band struck up on Broadway, and he moved a few steps toward the corner. I gave Amarilla a push, and didn't we fly out! Most unfortunately, as we scuttled along toward Riverside Drive, he turned and saw us. He stepped back quickly into the doorway, and I knew he had gone to give the alarm. "Run, Amarilla, run," I whispered. "They're after us, and if they catch us, your trainer will tear me limb from limb." Poor little soul, she was too wise to use her breath for speaking. She just tore on behind me, and nearly panted her little life out. I knew by her breathing that she hadn't been used to having much exercise. I had told her to run behind me, and not to think of automobiles or anything, but just to keep close to my hind paws. Of course, I led her right back to Broadway. It would have been foolish to keep on toward the drive, when the man had seen us going in that direction, and would likely get a taxi and follow us. I chose the front of another moving picture place, and made her creep in behind the billboards. "This is horrible," she gasped, "right in the jaws of danger." "Yes," I said, "just where they'll never think of looking for you." And didn't we, later on, have the satisfaction of hearing one man say to another, "Hear about Fifeson's dogs down at the other house? They've lost one. Saw her running off with another dog, a white fox terrier, and can't find her." "How much was she worth to Fifeson?" asked the man addressed. "He reckons her at $500, but I guess he's romancing." Amarilla trembled frightfully, but I reassured her by licking her wounded head, and after a long time, when the crowd was coming out of the theatre, I guided her among ladies' dresses, and creeping out, we rushed down to the drive again. Taking advantage of every bit of shadow we could find, we made short runs for home. It was about 11 when we arrived in front of our apartment house, and Amarilla was nearly dead. "Bear up a little longer," I said to her. "Imagine you're one of your big ancestors taught to keep within a short distance of a gun. And listen to a word of advice. The lady of the house is your friend. Pay no attention to the man." "I'm glad," she said faintly. "I'm terrified of all men, since that one has beaten me so much with his cruel whip." Oh, how angry I felt! That terrible whip is in evidence even on the stage, for did any one ever see a show of trained animals without the presence of the scourge in the hands of the master? He doesn't dare use it in public, but he shakes it, and the poor dog knows what is coming afterward. Oh, what a long breath I drew when we passed the floor-to-ceiling mirrors of our hallway, safe at last, and a sorry-looking sight. Amarilla's curls were muddy and torn, for I had had her in vacant lots, among shrubbery, everywhere, to escape the sharp eyes of the policeman. Then her own troubles made her look terribly. "What a wreck!" she murmured. Then she shut her eyes in pain and fatigue as she dropped to the floor of the elevator. "So you've got a friend," said the elevator boy with a grin. "You're a great dog. Never saw your beat." When I barked once at the door of our apartment, which was my signal for getting in, I hoped fervently that my master was at home. Thank fortune, he was. I ran up to him, threw myself across his feet, and panted, for even I, strong as I was, felt rather worn out, but not so much with exertion as with the excitement of rescuing my former little friend. Amarilla, according to instructions, crept timidly to Mrs. Granton's feet. I never saw anything look more humble than that little dog. She doubled up her little legs so that she seemed to be crawling on her stomach. Her air was humility, sad appeal, and restrained suffering. It was inimitable. End of chapter 15.